I received a call from a number I did not recognize last Tuesday. The man introduced himself as Ryan Donovan, a private investigator. My heart raced when he told me why he was calling. My own brother Alan had hired him to investigate me. Alan, my golden brother, who had everything. The brother I had looked up to my entire life, wanted to expose me as a failure. That betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment telling me where you are from, hit that like button, and subscribe if family drama keeps you on the edge of your seat. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, my brother Alan and I shared a room until I was 8 years old. Alan was 4 years older, and from my earliest memories he was perfect. He brought home straight, as while I struggled with C's and B's. He was captain of the debate team, quarterback of the football team, and president of the student council. I was just Jonathan, the younger Campbell brother. At family gatherings, relatives would flock to Alan asking about his latest achievements while offering me a quick pat on the head before moving on. I would stand in corners at these events, watching my brother shine while I faded into the background. Our parents never tried to hide their preference. Dad, a high school history teacher, spent weekends coaching Alan for academic competitions. Mom, who worked as a nurse, would reschedule her shifts to attend every one of his games. When I had my small victories, like winning 3rd place in a science fair, they would smile and say, "That is nice, Jonathan," before returning to conversations about Alan. The walls of our living room told the story clearer than words ever could. Framed certificates of Alan's achievements covered one entire wall. My few accomplishments were tucked away in a small corner, almost as an afterthought. The dining table was where I heard about Alan's latest triumph every night. Alan got accepted into the honor society, Dad would announce proudly. Alan was mentioned in the local newspaper for his volunteer work, Mom would add. I tried. I truly did. In 10th grade, I joined the swim team, hoping to find my own spotlight. I practiced until my muscles ached, waking up at 5 in the morning to train before school. When I won my first race, I rushed home excited to share the news. Mom was on the phone telling a friend about Alan getting early acceptance into Princeton. My victory went unmentioned during dinner that night. By the time Alan graduated high school as valedictorian, I had accepted my role as the lesser son. He went off to Princeton with a partial scholarship, while I struggled through junior year, my motivation dwindling with each passing day. What was the point of trying when nothing I did would ever measure up? Alan continued his streak of perfection through college. He graduated summa cum laude with a double major in political science and economics. The entire family flew out for his graduation. I stayed behind, claiming I had exams, but the truth was, I could not bear to sit through another celebration of his greatness. He was accepted into Harvard Law, surprising absolutely no one. During his 2nd year there, he met Catherine, a beautiful medical student from a prestigious Boston family. They were the perfect couple, both brilliant, both attractive, both destined for success. When they got engaged, our parents threw them an extravagant party. I showed up late, left early, and drank too much. The weight of never being good enough had become a part of me by then. It shaped every decision I made, including the one to drop out of community college during my sophomore year. When I told my parents, my father looked at me with such disappointment that I can still picture his face clearly a decade later. "Why cannot you be more like your brother?" he asked, not even trying to hide his frustration. Mom cried, of course. She spoke about potential and opportunities, but all I heard was comparison. More comparison to Alan, who by then had secured an internship at one of the top law firms in the country. The night after I dropped out, I lay in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to my parents discuss what went wrong with me through the thin walls. "He has always been the difficult one," Dad said with a sigh. "Alan never gave us this kind of trouble." That was the moment I decided to leave. I could not continue living as the other Campbell's son forever, in the shadow of perfection. I needed to find out who Jonathan was, without the constant comparison to Alan. Seattle was as far as I could get from Chicago without leaving the mainland. I arrived with 2 suitcases, and enough money to last a couple of months if I was careful. The city welcomed me with its characteristic rain, which suited my mood perfectly. I found a tiny studio apartment in a rundown building, and a job at a small computer repair shop owned by a gruff man named Jack Townsend. Jack was in his 60s with calloused hands and sharp eyes that seemed to see right through people. He hired me on the spot when I fixed a fried motherboard while waiting for my interview. "You got good hands and a good brain," he told me. "That is more than most people got." Working at the shop, I discovered something unexpected. I was good with computers. More than good, actually. I had a knack for understanding systems, for seeing how different parts connected and affected each other. Jack noticed too, and started giving me the more complex repairs. 6 months into the job, I stayed late one evening to work on a particularly challenging recovery of data from a corrupted hard drive. Jack returned to the shop after closing time and found me still working. "Why are you so determined to fix that thing?" he asked, pulling up a chair beside me. "The owner is a photographer," I explained. "These are photos from her trip to Antarctica. Once in a lifetime, memories that cannot be replaced." Jack nodded slowly. "You care about the people behind the machines." That simple observation hit me harder than it should have. No one in my family had ever noticed anything about me that mattered. Over cheap takeout from the Chinese restaurant next door, Jack told me his story. He had been a software engineer at Microsoft in the early days, but left to start his own security consulting firm. He had sold it 10 years ago for enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. "Why do you still run this shop then?" I asked. He shrugged. "Keeps me busy. Lets me spot talent." After that night, Jack became more than just my boss. He became my mentor. He started teaching me about network security, explaining concepts after hours when the shop was closed. He lent me books on ethical hacking and programming languages. Under his guidance, I discovered a passion for cybersecurity. "You got a gift for this," Jack told me one day. "You see patterns others miss." A year after arriving in Seattle, I wrote my first security program, a simple tool to detect unusual network activity. Jack tested it on his home system and was impressed enough to introduce me to some of his former colleagues in the tech industry. One of them, Teresa Wong, a venture capitalist who specialized in tech startups, saw potential in my ideas. She arranged a meeting with potential investors, and suddenly I was being offered funding to develop my security software further. Jack helped me navigate the contracts and business aspects I knew nothing about. At 23, I founded my first company, SecureNet Solutions. For 6 months, everything seemed perfect. We developed our software, hired a small team, and prepared for launch. Then came the crash. A major competitor released a similar product 1 week before our launch date. Our investors pulled out, and the company folded before it truly began. I spent a week holed up in my apartment, feeling like the failure my family always thought I was. Jack showed up on the 7th day, kicked my door open, and dragged me out for breakfast. "You think success happens on the first try?" he asked over pancakes. "I failed 3 times before I got it right. The question is not whether you will fail, son. The question is whether you will get back up." Those words changed something in me. I started fresh, analyzing what went wrong with SecureNet. I identified the flaws in both the business model and the software itself. Then I began again with a new approach. This time, I developed an application that focused on mobile security, something the market was just beginning to recognize as essential. I worked 18-hour days for months, refining every aspect of the program. Jack introduced me to new potential investors, including Max Gregson, a silent partner in several successful tech ventures. Max saw something in my work that others missed. He invested $2 million for a 15% stake in my new company, Privacy Guard Technologies. His backing attracted other investors, and suddenly I had the capital I needed to build something substantial. I hired carefully, building a team of dedicated programmers and security experts. We worked in relative obscurity for 2 years, perfecting our product before a quiet launch. Unlike my first venture, I took a different approach to marketing, focusing on quality and reliability rather than flashy features. The business grew steadily. By year 3, we had contracts with several mid-sized companies. By year 5, we were securing the mobile communications of 2 Fortune 500 corporations. The revenue reached 8 figures, then 9. All this time, I kept my success private. I still lived in a modest apartment, though I had upgraded from the rundown studio to a comfortable 1-bedroom. I drove a used Honda Civic. My clothes came from department stores, not designer boutiques. The few people who knew of my wealth were bound by confidentiality agreements. I maintained minimal contact with my family, calling my mother on birthdays and holidays. When she asked about my life, I kept my answers vague. Work is good, I would say. I am doing fine. I never corrected her assumption that I was still working at that computer shop, barely making ends meet. Alan, meanwhile, had become a junior partner at his law firm. He had 2 children, a boy and a girl, both apparently as perfect as he was. He had purchased a house in an exclusive Chicago suburb. My parents visited him monthly, eagerly reporting back to me about his wonderful life during our brief phone conversations. The fear of being judged, of being compared to Alan, kept me from sharing my success. Part of me wanted to prove them all wrong, to show up in a luxury car and expensive suit and shock them with what I had accomplished. But a deeper part feared they would somehow diminish my achievements, find ways to credit luck or connections, rather than my own abilities. So I kept my distance and my secrets. The pain of being the lesser son had transformed into something different, but equally powerful. The fear of not being seen for who I truly was, even in success. Jack was the only person from my daily life who knew the truth. "You are going to have to face them someday," he told me once. "Not for them, for you." I knew he was right, but I was not ready. Not yet. Then, after 10 years of self-imposed exile, an invitation arrived that I could not ignore. My cousin Sarah was getting married in Chicago. She had been the only family member who had treated me with genuine kindness growing up. I had to go. The flight to Chicago felt like traveling back in time. As the plane descended through the clouds, I could feel my hard-won confidence beginning to crack. I was no longer Jonathan Campbell's successful entrepreneur. I was just Jonathan Allen's disappointing younger brother. The wedding was to be held at an upscale country club in the suburbs. I checked into a nearby hotel, spending extra time getting ready, as if the right suit could somehow armor me against the judgments to come. The rehearsal dinner was the first hurdle. I arrived precisely on time, neither early enough to appear eager, nor late enough to draw attention. It took less than 5 minutes for my mother to find me. "Jonathan, you look so thin. Are you eating properly?" She embraced me, her familiar perfume, bringing back a flood of memories. "I am fine, Mom," I replied, the practiced response automatic. Dad approached next, giving me an awkward pat on the shoulder. "Good to see you, son. How is the computer shop, still fixing laptops?" Before I could answer, a familiar voice called out, "Little brother, you finally decided to grace us with your presence." Alan looked exactly as I expected. Perfectly tailored suit, perfectly trimmed hair, perfect white teeth, flashing in a perfect smile. He embraced me with television-worthy, brotherly affection. "Alan, good to see you," I lied. "You too. It has been too long. You need to come visit us sometime. The kids would love to meet their Uncle Jonathan." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Though fair warning, Trevor is at that age where he asks a million questions about everything. "Sounds like a smart kid," I replied. Alan beamed. "He is. Tested in the 99th percentile for his age group. Principal says he might skip a grade." And so it began. Throughout the evening, Alan regaled everyone with stories of his successful cases, his children's achievements, and the vacation home they were considering purchasing in Florida. When conversations turned to me, he would interject with brotherly concern. "Jonathan has always been the creative one," he would say, as if explaining a disability. "He follows his own path." Then he would inevitably mention my little job at the computer shop, his tone suggesting both support and pity. Mom and Dad nodded along occasionally, adding their own observations about how I had always struggled with commitment or never quite found my direction. I drank 3 glasses of whiskey and left early, claiming jet lag. The wedding itself was the following afternoon. I managed to blend into the background for most of the ceremony and reception, speaking only to Sarah and her new husband and a few cousins who seemed genuinely interested in my life. I kept my answers vague and redirected questions, a skill I had perfected over the years. It was during the reception dinner that things took a turn. I was seated at a table with my parents and Alan's family. Catherine, Alan's wife, asked politely about my work. Before I could answer, Alan jumped in. "Jonathan fixes computers for people who are not tech-savvy enough to do it themselves. It is humble work, but someone has to do it right." He laughed, patting my shoulder. Dad nodded sagely. "We always knew Alan would take the corporate path, and Jonathan would do something more, alternative." Mom added, "We just want him to be happy. Not everyone is meant for the kind of success Alan has achieved." I felt like I was 10 years old again, invisible in my own life. I excused myself and headed to the bar, ordering a double scotch. As I stood there, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello," I answered, grateful for the distraction. "Is this Jonathan Campbell?" a male voice asked. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Ryan Donovan. I am a private investigator." He paused. "This is somewhat awkward, but I believe you should know that your brother Alan hired me to investigate you." The room seemed to tilt sideways. "What are you talking about?" "Your brother contracted me 3 weeks ago to conduct a thorough investigation into your life. He was quite specific about wanting details about your finances, living situation, and, quote, proof of his failure, end quote. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in the course of my investigation, I discovered something that I believe changes the dynamic considerably." Ryan paused. "Mr. Campbell, I know that you are the CEO and founder of Privacy Guard Technologies. I know your company was recently valued at over $200 million, and I know you have kept this success secret from your family." I gripped the bar to steady myself. "How did you find that out? That information is not public." "I am very good at my job, Mr. Campbell. The question is, why is a man worth millions living in a modest apartment driving a 10-year-old Honda and allowing his family to believe he is struggling?" I had no answer. That did not sound pathetic even to myself. "Look," Ryan continued, "normally I would not break client confidentiality like this. But something about this situation does not sit right with me. Your brother specifically asked me to dig up evidence that would, and again I am quoting, show everyone what a disappointment Jonathan truly is. That crosses a line for me." I looked across the room at Alan laughing with a group of relatives, the golden son in his element. "What do you want, Mr. Donovan?" "I do not want anything. I just thought you should know what your brother is doing." He paused. "Though I admit I am curious about what you plan to do with this information." The anger that had been building for decades crystallized in that moment. "I am not sure yet. But I appreciate the call. One more thing, Mr. Campbell. Your brother has arranged for me to present my findings at your father's birthday dinner next weekend. He told me it was meant to be a wake-up call for you." The cruelty of it stunned me. Alan wanted to publicly humiliate me in front of our entire family. "Are you still planning to do this presentation?" I asked. Ryan chuckled. "That depends entirely on you, Mr. Campbell. I have a feeling we could arrange something much more educational for everyone involved." As I hung up, I caught Alan watching me from across the room, a smug smile on his face. For the first time in my life, I did not look away first. The week before Dad's birthday celebration was the longest of my life. I stayed in Chicago, extending my hotel reservation and taking work calls remotely. Ryan and I met twice to discuss our plan. The more I learned about Alan's instructions to him, the more my resolve strengthened. Alan had provided Ryan with a list of specific areas to investigate, all designed to paint me in the worst possible light. He wanted evidence of failed relationships, financial struggles, and dead-end career prospects. He had even asked Ryan to interview former employers to gather negative feedback. "I have been doing this job for 15 years, Ryan told me over coffee, and I have never seen a more deliberate attempt by one family member to destroy another's reputation." Why would he go to such lengths, I wondered aloud. Ryan shrugged. "My guess? You are the only person who knows who he really is. The only one who saw behind the golden boy facade. That makes you dangerous." On the night of the birthday dinner, I arrived at my parents' house early, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. Mom hugged me tightly. 2 visits in 1 month. "What a treat," she said. "Though you really should come home more often. Alan visits at least once a month with the children." "I have been busy, Mom," I replied, the understatement of the decade. Dad greeted me with his usual awkward pat. "Glad you could make it, son." Guests began to arrive, relatives, family, friends, Dad's colleagues from the high school. Alan and his family were the last to arrive, making an entrance as if they were royalty gracing a gathering of commoners. Throughout dinner, Alan kept making meaningful eye contact with me, occasionally checking his watch. He had told the family that he had arranged a special presentation for Dad after dinner. When the plates were cleared and birthday cake served, Alan stood tapping his glass with a spoon. If I could have everyone's attention, please. As many of you know, I have arranged a special surprise for Dad's birthday. He smiled directly at me. But before we get to that, I want to say a few words about family. He launched into a speech about the Campbell family values hard work, integrity, and perseverance. With each word, his eyes would flick to me, the implication clear I embodied none of these values. Some of us have been fortunate enough to find success by following the path laid out by our parents, he continued. Others have taken different routes with varying degrees of success. Another pointed look my way. But what matters most is honesty, being truthful about who we are and what we have accomplished. The doorbell rang, and Alan's smile widened. Ah, that must be our special guest. I will get it. He returned moments later with Ryan, who carried a leather portfolio and wore a perfectly neutral expression. They had never met in person, all their communication having been done over the phone and through email. Everyone, this is Ryan Donovan. He is here to share some interesting information with us. Alan announced, practically vibrating with malicious anticipation. Ryan stepped forward. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Before I begin, I would like to clarify that I was hired to conduct an investigation into Jonathan Campbell's life and current circumstances. Murmurs spread through the room. Mom looked confused. Dad uncomfortable. I maintained a calm expression, my hands steady for the first time since arriving in Chicago. My investigation was quite thorough, Ryan continued, and what I discovered was quite remarkable. Alan's smile was predatory now. Please share with everyone what you found out about my brother's situation. Ryan nodded. I discovered that Jonathan Campbell is the founder and CEO of Privacy Guard Technologies, a cybersecurity firm currently valued at over $200 million. He holds patents on 7 different security protocols used by major corporations worldwide. His net worth is estimated to be approximately $80 million. The room went silent. Alan's face transformed from smug anticipation to shock, then disbelief. That is ridiculous, he sputtered. Jonathan works at a computer repair shop. He barely makes ends meet. Ryan opened his portfolio and removed a copy of the latest issue of Forbes. My face was on the cover, under the headline, Security's Silent Giant, the Reclusive Genius Behind Privacy Guard. This issue hits newsstands tomorrow, Ryan explained, passing it to my father, whose hands trembled as he took it. I was able to get an advance copy. Mom looked from the magazine to me, her eyes wide. Jonathan, is this true? I nodded slowly. Yes, Mom. Everything Ryan said is true. But why would you keep this from us? She asked, her voice small. I stood up, feeling strangely calm. I think Alan can answer that question. Alan, why did you hire a private investigator to look into my life? What were you hoping to find? All eyes turned to my brother, whose face had drained of color. I just wanted to know what was going on with you, he stammered. You have been so secretive for so long. That is not true, Ryan interrupted. I have the email you sent me outlining what you wanted. You specifically asked for evidence of, and I quote, financial failure, professional stagnation, and personal misery. You wanted proof to show your family that Jonathan was the disappointment. You always knew he was. The room erupted in shocked exclamations. Catherine stared at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. My parents looked devastated. Is this true? Alan Dad asked. Alan's facade cracked completely. You do not understand. None of you do. He was always the one everyone actually liked. I had to be perfect all the time. One mistake, and I would lose everything. He could do whatever he wanted, take whatever risks, because no one expected anything from him. The raw jealousy in his voice silenced the room. You were jealous of me, I asked incredulously. You had everything. You were the golden child. Mom and Dad worshipped you. Everyone did. They expected perfection. Alan shouted, his composure completely gone. Do you have any idea what that pressure was like? Meanwhile, you got to disappear, reinvent yourself, take risks, fail, try again. I never had that freedom. In that moment, I saw my brother clearly for the first time. Behind the perfect exterior was someone as wounded as I was, twisted by the same family dynamic but from the opposite end. I would have traded places with you in a heartbeat, I said quietly. All I ever wanted was for them to see me the way they saw you. Mom was crying now. Dad looked older than I had ever seen him. We never meant, Mom began. I know, I interrupted gently. You never meant to make either of us feel the way we did. But you did. You set up a dynamic where Alan had to be perfect, and I had to be invisible. I turned to Alan. I forgive you for this. I understand where it came from. But this is the last time you get to use me as an outlet for your own issues. We are both adults now. We get to decide what our relationship looks like going forward. Alan nodded slowly, the fight draining out of him. I addressed my parents next. I love you both, but I need you to understand something. I am not going to be compared to Alan anymore. Not negatively or positively. I am my own person, with my own life, and my own success. The rest of the evening was subdued. People left early, uncomfortable with the family drama they had witnessed. By 10 only, my immediate family remained. We talked until after midnight. Really talked for perhaps the first time ever. Mom and Dad apologized for their role in creating the toxic rivalry between Alan and me. Alan admitted to decades of resentment over the pressure he felt. I acknowledged that disappearing had been my way of avoiding pain rather than healing it. Nothing was fixed in a single night, of course. Decades of dysfunction cannot be undone that quickly, but it was a beginning. Over the following year, we rebuilt our relationships on healthier foundations. Alan and I will never be best friends, but we have found a way to be brothers without the competition that defined our early lives. My parents and I talk regularly now, and they have visited me in Seattle 3 times. Ryan Donovan and I have become unlikely friends. His willingness to break the rules of his profession to prevent an injustice created a bond between us. He even did some consulting work for Privacy Guard before opening his own security firm with my backing. As for me, I finally learned that true success has nothing to do with money or status. It is about being authentic, about defining yourself rather than allowing others to define you. It is about building relationships based on truth rather than expectations. What about you? Have you ever been compared to someone else and felt like you would never measure up, or been the golden child with impossible standards to maintain? Drop a comment below, sharing your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that they are enough exactly as they are. Thank you for listening, and remember, the only person you need to impress is the one looking back at you in the mirror.